The 7th of October is a very auspicious date. On the 7th of October, in 1944, the Jewish inmates of the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp rose up in an uprising. They tore down the walls. They tore down the barbed wire. They murdered their guards, their SS guards, in significant numbers. And they fought with their teeth, where that was all that they had, for freedom. All of them were killed by the beasts who were keeping them in that concentration camp, that death camp. And 200 other inmates were the next day picked by lottery and murdered against a wall to discourage the others. That was on the 7th of October, 1944. The perspicacious amongst you will already have seen a parallel in what happened on the 7th of October of 2023. Now, this is a difficult day for us because state propaganda in all Western states is in full industrialized narrative control. And people like me have been receiving calls all day from journalists and public calls from other politicians to say that it is incumbent upon us to fall into line with the state narrative in this and in other states. So it's a difficult day to say what I'm going to say next. We in the Workers' Party stand foursquare with the Palestinian people in their despair, in their agony, in the despair, the same despair that drove the inmates of Auschwitz-Birkenau is the despair that was the wellspring of 7th October 2023. If I put you, your parents, your grandparents in a concentration camp, deprived you of food, regularly murdered you, occupied your land, air, and sea space, regularly bombarded you, and murdered your children, you'd rise up too, because that's what human beings do when placed in a concentration camp, when placed in a state of despair. And the truth is, it's a miracle that 7th October 2023 didn't happen before. It's a miracle that it didn't happen every day. Because the human condition, when pushed beyond that which any human being can, with dignity, endure, will rise up against it. We never had the chance, despite all the efforts of the Luftwaffe in this city, to break the spirit of the British people. We continued to resist, to stand alone for a time. But if we had been occupied by the Nazis who were at the Channel ports around this time in 1940 until the midsummer of 1941, when the few of our Royal Air Force, complemented by Polish pilots, pilots from the Empire as it was called then, French pilots who had escaped with our men at Dunkirk. During that period, there was every possibility that our country would have been occupied, that many people like you would have been in concentration camps, deprived of all and everything that makes human life bearable. We would have risen up too. The best men and women in this country would have joined the resistance, like the French resistance, whom Hitler called terrorists when they rose up against their occupier, when they cut the throats of the SS and the occupying Nazi forces. They called them terrorists. We called them freedom fighters. We called them the resistance in France. We would have been the resistance in Britain. And the Palestinian people are the resistance now in occupied Palestine. It's hard for me to say these things today of all days. The pressure is enormous. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We will never surrender our support for the Palestinian people under occupation and under bombardment. We have had an entire year of watching, not on our television screens, because it doesn't appear there, but on our telephones. We have had an entire year of watching not 1,200 people being killed, but 160,000 people being massacred, most of them women and children. Most of them. At least 65, but maybe 75% of the dead and wounded, mutilated, amputated, scarred for life, emotionally destroyed, have been women and children. And the fact that our state narrative today cannot even spare one word for them is what makes our party and its perspective so important. Because when the House of Commons is unanimous, it's almost always unanimously wrong. And this House of Commons, this shrunken House of Commons, with the exception, I should say, of the local MP, Zara Sultana, who today, she's not a Labour MP anymore, she's suspended. Why is she suspended? For standing up for our old age pensioners who just had their cold weather payment stolen from them by a so-called Labour government. She spoke courageously in the House of Commons today and was treated with utter contempt by the so-called Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, Blair, Mark II, Tony Blair, without the laughs. This grim vista of tyrannical media control, even now moving into banning people from social media, from enunciating an alternative view, a contrary perspective, is what we are standing against. And if we do not, then we are coming to the end of the period in which it was possible to describe Britain as a democracy, to describe Britain as a free country. There are many people